Your thoughts are lying to you. Not occasionally. Not accidentally. Constantly. And the worst part is, you trust them. You treat them like truth. Like guidance. Like something that's supposed to lead you forward. So when your mind tells you to wait, you wait. When it tells you you're not ready, you believe it. When it tells you something might go wrong, you step back. You obey. Man is disturbed not by things, but by the views he takes of them. Epictetus. That voice in your head is not designed to make you powerful. It's designed to keep you safe. And safety does not create growth. It creates limitation. Your mind scans for risk, for uncertainty, for anything that might expose you to failure, rejection, or discomfort. And when it finds it, it sends you a signal. Stop. Wait. Think more. Be careful. And because that signal feels intelligent, you listen. But what you don't realize is this. Your mind does not care about your potential. It cares about your survival. And survival operates on a completely different standard. It prioritizes comfort over growth, familiarity over expansion, certainty over opportunity. So every time you try to do something that moves your life forward, your mind reacts. Not with support, with resistance. It gives you thoughts that feel real, convincing, logical, but they all point in one direction. Stay where you are. You've heard them. This isn't the right time. You need more preparation. You might fail. What will people think? They sound like caution, but they are limitation. Because if you follow them long enough, your entire life becomes restricted by imagined outcomes. You start living based on what might happen, instead of what you can make happen. And that is how people stay stuck while believing they're being smart. You think you're avoiding mistakes, but you're actually avoiding progress. Because progress requires exposure. And exposure is exactly what your mind is trying to prevent. So you stay in your head, where everything feels controlled, where nothing can go wrong, where you can simulate success without risking failure. But outside your mind, nothing changes. Your life does not respond to thoughts. It responds to action. And as long as your actions are controlled by your thoughts, your life will remain limited by them. This is the trap. Not ignorance. Not lack of ability. Misplaced trust. You trust your thoughts more than you trust action. And that is why you hesitate. Why you delay. Why you stay stuck in cycles that you already understand but never break. Because every time you're about to act, your mind intervenes. It introduces doubt. It creates hesitation. It gives you just enough uncertainty to stop you from moving. And because you believe those thoughts, you stop. Again, and again, and again. Until hesitation becomes your default. Not because you chose it, but because you reinforced it. This is how your mind quietly takes control of your life. Not through force. Through suggestion. It doesn't tell you what to do. It influences what you don't do. And that's more powerful. Because what you avoid defines your life more than what you attempt. You avoid risk. You avoid discomfort. You avoid action. And over time, your life becomes smaller. Not because you lack potential, but because you keep listening to a voice that is designed to limit you. So here is the shift. Your thoughts are not commands. They are suggestions. And most of them are wrong. Not logically, functionally, because they are based on fear, not growth. On protection, not expansion. So instead of asking, is this thought true? You start asking, is this thought useful? Because usefulness is what matters, not accuracy. A thought can be accurate and still destroy your progress. This might be hard. True, but useless if it stops you. I could fail. True, but useless if it prevents you from trying. This isn't the perfect time. True, but useless if it keeps you inactive. You don't need thoughts that are correct. You need thoughts that move you forward. And most of yours don't. They hold you back. So you stop trusting them blindly. You question them. You challenge them. And most importantly, you act against them. Because action is the only way to break their authority. You don't defeat overthinking by thinking better. You defeat it by acting regardless of what your mind is telling you. That is the separation. That is the control. You feel the doubt. You hear the hesitation. And you move anyway. That is how you take your power back. Not by silencing your mind, but by refusing to obey it. You don't just listen to your thoughts. You identify with them. That is the real problem. Because the moment you believe your thoughts are you, you stop questioning them. You stop challenging them. You stop separating yourself from them. And whatever your mind says becomes your reality. You become what you give your attention to. Epictetus. Right now, you give your attention to doubt. So you become hesitation. You give your attention to fear. So you become avoidance. You give your attention to imagined outcomes. So you become inactive. Not because those thoughts are true, but because you treat them like they are. This is how your identity is being shaped. Quietly, daily, without you noticing. You wake up, and your mind starts speaking. Not in commands. In suggestions. You're tired. This can wait. You're not ready. This might not work. And instead of observing those thoughts, you absorb them. You take them in as fact. You let them define your state. And then your actions follow. You delay. You hesitate. You stay still. And by the end of the day, nothing has changed. Not because you didn't know what to do, but because you believed something that told you not to do it. That is the mechanism. Thought, belief, behavior, identity. And you've been reinforcing it for years. Without interruption. Without resistance. Without awareness. So now it feels natural. It feels like that voice is you. But it isn't. It's conditioning. Built from past experiences. From fear. From failure. From moments where staying safe felt necessary. Your mind learned a pattern. Avoid risk. Minimize exposure. Stay within control. And it repeats that pattern automatically. Even when it no longer serves you. Even when it is holding you back. Even when it is costing you your future. Because your mind does not update itself. You do. And if you don't intervene, it will keep running the same script. Over and over again. You will keep thinking the same thoughts. Making the same decisions. Living the same patterns. And calling it your personality. It's not your personality. It's repetition. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. Power begins with separation. The ability to see a thought without becoming it. To hear doubt without obeying it. To feel fear without submitting to it. That is control. Not eliminating thoughts. Detaching from them. Because once you create that space, something changes. You stop reacting automatically. You stop being pulled into every internal narrative. You start choosing what to believe, what to ignore, what to act on. And that choice is what gives you control over your life. Right now, your thoughts control your actions. And your actions control your results. So indirectly, your thoughts control your life, but only because you allow them to, because you never questioned them. You never challenged their authority. You never separated yourself from them. That ends now. You begin to observe, not passively, actively. When a thought appears, you don't immediately accept it. You pause, and you ask one question. Does this move me forward? Not is it true? Not does it make sense? Does it move me forward? If the answer is no, it is irrelevant. It does not matter how logical it sounds. It does not matter how real it feels. It is noise. And you treat it as such. You don't argue with it. You don't analyze it. You don't try to fix it. You ignore it. And you act anyway. Because action is what rewrites the pattern, not thought. Every time you act against a limiting thought, you weaken it. Every time you obey it, you strengthen it. That is the law. No exceptions. So your job is simple. Not easy. Simple. Disobey the thoughts that keep you still. Repeatedly. Consistently. Without negotiation. At first, it will feel unnatural. Uncomfortable. Even wrong. Because you are breaking a pattern that has been reinforced for years. Your mind will resist. It will get louder, more convincing, more persistent. That is not a sign to stop. That is a sign that you are finally challenging it. And this is where most people fail. They feel that resistance and assume something is wrong. So they go back. Back to thinking. Back to hesitation. Back to the same life. You don't. You move through it. Because on the other side of that resistance is something you haven't experienced in a long time. Control. Not over your thoughts. Over your actions. And that is what matters. Because your life is not built by what you think. It is built by what you do. So you let your mind say whatever it wants. Doubt. Fear. Uncertainty. You don't fight it. You don't engage with it. You move anyway. And over time, something shifts. Those thoughts lose influence. Not because they disappear, but because you stop responding to them. They become background noise, instead of commands. And once that happens, your life begins to open. You take actions you used to avoid. You move in directions you used to fear. You create momentum where there used to be hesitation. And that momentum changes everything. Because now, your identity begins to shift. From someone who listens to their thoughts, to someone who leads despite them. That is power. Not silence. Not peace. Control under pressure. Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. Epictetus. What is in your power is not your thoughts. It is your response to them. And once you master that, everything changes. Because now, your mind no longer limits your life. It becomes background. And your actions take control. The most dangerous lie your mind tells you is not fear. It's identity. It convinces you that the way you think is who you are. That your hesitation is your personality. That your anxiety is natural. That your inconsistency is just how you function. And once you accept that, you stop trying to change it. Because you don't fight what you believe is you. You are not your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts. Epictetus. But you've forgotten how to observe. You've been absorbing everything your mind produces. Every doubt becomes your doubt. Every fear becomes your fear. Every limitation becomes your identity. And over time, you build a version of yourself that feels fixed, predictable, restricted. You say things like, "This is just how I am. I've always been like this. I'm not that kind of person." And in those moments, you lock yourself in place. Because identity is the strongest force in your life. Stronger than motivation. Stronger than logic. Stronger than opportunity. You will always act in alignment with who you believe you are. So if you believe you are someone who overthinks, you will keep overthinking. If you believe you are someone who hesitates, you will keep hesitating. If you believe you are someone who struggles to act, you will continue to delay. Not because it's true, but because it's familiar. And your mind prioritizes familiarity over growth. That is the illusion. You are not stuck because of your circumstances. You are stuck because of the identity you keep reinforcing. And that identity is built from repeated thoughts you never challenged. Thoughts that became beliefs. Beliefs that became behavior. Behavior that became identity. And now it feels real. Permanent. Unchangeable. It's not. It's constructed. And anything constructed can be dismantled. You become what you think about all day long. Ralph Waldo Emerson. You've been thinking like someone who stays stuck. So you became someone who stays stuck. Not intentionally, but consistently. And consistency creates identity. So if you want to break the illusion, you don't start with thoughts. You start with behavior. Because behavior is the fastest way to disrupt identity. You don't wait to feel like a disciplined person. You act like one. Immediately. You don't wait to feel confident. You move with uncertainty. You don't wait to feel ready. You begin anyway. Because every action you take that contradicts your current identity creates tension. And that tension forces change. At first, it feels wrong. Unnatural. Like you're pretending. Like you're acting out of character. That's exactly what should happen. Because your current character is the problem. You are breaking it. Replacing it. Rewriting it through action. This is where most people retreat. They take one step outside their pattern, feel uncomfortable, and interpret that discomfort as a sign that they're not ready. So they go back. Back to thinking. Back to hesitation. Back to the identity they're trying to escape. You don't. You stay in the discomfort. Because discomfort is not a warning. It's a signal that you are doing something different. And different is what creates change. Not more of the same thinking. Not more analysis. Not more preparation. Difference. You act in ways that your old identity would avoid. Repeatedly. Consistently. Without waiting for internal agreement. Because agreement comes after action, not before. And over time, something starts to fracture. The old identity weakens. It loses certainty. It loses control. Because your actions no longer support it. You're no longer reinforcing it. You're contradicting it. And identity cannot survive contradiction. It adapts. It updates. It shifts. This is how you become someone new. Not through intention. Through repetition of different behavior. Circumstances don't make the man. They only reveal him to himself. Epictetus. Right now, your circumstances are revealing something. That you've been listening to your mind more than you've been directing your actions. That you've been identifying with thoughts instead of observing them. That you've been reinforcing a version of yourself that keeps you small. And now you see it. Clearly. So the illusion breaks. You are not your thoughts. You are not your past patterns. You are not your hesitation. You are what you do. Repeatedly. Under pressure. Without excuses. That is your real identity. And that means something important. You can change it. Immediately. Not slowly. Not eventually. Immediately. By changing what you do next. Because identity does not change in theory. It changes in action. You take one step that your old self would avoid. Then another. Then another. And with each step, you create evidence. Evidence that you are not who you thought you were. Evidence that you can act despite doubt. Evidence that your thoughts do not control you. And that evidence builds something stronger than belief. Certainty. Not in your thoughts. In your ability to act. And once you have that, everything shifts. You stop questioning yourself. You stop hesitating. You stop waiting. Because now you know. Not think. Know. That you can move regardless of what your mind says. That is the break. That is where the illusion collapses. And what's left is simple. Action. Unfiltered. Unrestricted. Unaffected by the noise in your head. That is who you become. Not someone without thoughts. Someone who is no longer controlled by them. Install unbreakable control. You don't need more understanding. You need a system that holds when you don't feel like holding. Because that's where everything collapses. Not when things are easy. When resistance shows up. When your mind gets loud. When your emotions shift. When your energy drops. That's where your current structure breaks. Because it's built on feeling. And feelings are unstable. He who conquers himself is the mightiest warrior. Confucius. Control is not about eliminating weakness. It's about operating regardless of it. Right now, your behavior depends on your state. If you feel focused, you act. If you feel tired, you delay. If you feel confident, you move. If you feel uncertain, you hesitate. So your life becomes inconsistent. Not because you lack discipline. Because your system is weak. It relies on variables you cannot control. Mood. Energy. Emotion. And anything built on unstable inputs will produce unstable results. So the solution is not motivation. It's structure. You build a system where action is automatic, not optional, not negotiable. Automatic. You remove the decision, because decision is where your mind interferes. Every time you stop to decide whether to act, you create space for doubt, for hesitation, for overthinking. So you eliminate that space. You replace it with rules. Clear, simple, non-negotiable rules. When this happens, I do this. No thinking. No evaluation. No delay. Just execution. You wake up. You act. You don't ask how you feel. You follow the protocol. Because the moment you start asking how you feel, you've already lost control. Your mind enters the conversation. And once it does, it starts negotiating. Maybe later. Not today. You need rest. It sounds reasonable, but it leads to the same outcome. Inaction. So you don't give it that opportunity. You move before the conversation begins. That is control, not force. Prevention. You prevent hesitation by removing the conditions that create it. You don't rely on willpower. You design your behavior. Because willpower fades, structure remains. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Epictetus. You already know what you want to be. Disciplined, focused, consistent. But wanting that is irrelevant. What matters is whether your daily actions reflect it. And right now they don't. Not consistently. So you install a rule. A simple one. When action is required, you act immediately. Not after thinking. Not after preparing. Immediately. This is your foundation. Everything builds on this. You see the task. You start. No delay. Because delay is where the pattern begins. And once the pattern begins, it pulls you back into the same cycle. Thinking, hesitating, avoiding. So you cut it off at the source. Speed. Speed removes doubt. Speed removes overthinking. Speed forces execution. Not reckless speed. Decisive speed. You don't rush blindly. You move intentionally without delay. And that changes everything. Because now, your actions are no longer dependent on your internal state. They are driven by your system. And your system does not care how you feel. It executes. That is how you build something unbreakable. Not through intensity. Through consistency. Daily. Repeated. Unemotional execution. You don't need to feel powerful. You need to act predictably. Because predictability creates trust. Trust in yourself. And once you trust yourself, hesitation disappears. Not because fear is gone. Because it no longer matters. You act anyway. This is where your identity stabilizes. You are no longer someone who tries. You are someone who does. Regardless of circumstances. Regardless of mood. Regardless of resistance. That is control. Not control of your thoughts. Control of your actions. And your actions define your life. So when your mind says stop, you go. When it says wait, you move. When it says think more, You execute, not because it's easy, because it's necessary. And over time, something shifts. Your mind adapts. It stops resisting as much, because it realizes it's no longer in control. You are. And that changes the entire dynamic. You no longer fight your thoughts. You override them. Automatically. Without hesitation. Without effort. Because it's been trained. Through repetition. Through consistency. Through refusal to break the rule. That is how control becomes permanent. Not by eliminating resistance. By becoming stronger than it. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Marcus Aurelius. You don't need more knowledge. You don't need more insight. You need to live what you already understand. Relentlessly. Without exception. That is the difference between knowing and becoming. And right now, you have the knowledge. This is where you become. Become unstoppable. There is a version of you that does not hesitate. Not because life is easier. Not because fear is gone. But because the decision has already been made. That version of you does not wake up and negotiate with the day. It executes. Immediately. Directly. Without internal debate. Do not pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a difficult one. Bruce Lee. You've spent enough time thinking. Enough time analyzing. Enough time preparing. That phase is over. Because thinking has already given you everything it can. Clarity. Awareness. Understanding. And none of it changed your life. Because none of it was followed by consistent execution. So now, the only thing that matters is what you do next. Not what you plan. Not what you intend. What you do. Immediately after this ends. Because that is the moment where everything is decided. Not in your mind. In your action. You either default back to your pattern, or you break it. And that decision does not happen once. It happens every time resistance shows up. Every time your mind tells you to wait. Every time your body wants to avoid discomfort. Every time you feel the pull to stay in your head. That is the moment. And if you hesitate there, you reinforce the old identity. If you move there, you build the new one. That is the line. Clear. Unforgiving. Real. You don't become unstoppable by removing difficulty. You become unstoppable by removing hesitation. Because hesitation is the only thing that has been stopping you. Not your circumstances. Not your ability. Not your environment. Hesitation. And hesitation is a choice. Repeated. Conditioned. But still a choice. Which means it can be replaced. With something stronger. Immediate execution. You don't wait to feel aligned. You don't wait to feel confident. You don't wait to feel ready. You act. And that action creates something your mind cannot replicate. Momentum. Once momentum starts, everything becomes easier to sustain. Not because resistance disappears. Because movement continues. And movement reduces friction. You've experienced this. The hardest part is starting. After that, it becomes easier to continue. But you rarely get past the start. Because you hesitate. So you remove that point of failure. You eliminate the gap between thought and action. You collapse it. Completely. Thought appears. Action follows. Instantly. No delay. No negotiation. No internal discussion. That is what makes you unstoppable. Not strength. Not intelligence. Speed of execution. Because speed prevents interference. It prevents your mind from creating resistance. It prevents hesitation from forming. It keeps you in motion. And motion is what creates results. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be consistent. Relentlessly consistent. Because consistency compounds. Every action builds on the last. Every decision reinforces the next. Every movement strengthens the identity. Until something shifts permanently. You no longer think about acting. You act. Automatically. That is when you know the change is real. Not when you feel different. When you behave differently without thinking about it. That is identity. And identity is what makes it permanent. Nothing will work unless you do. Maya Angelou. There is nothing left to understand. Nothing left to figure out. Nothing left to wait for. You already know. Now you execute. That is the only path forward. Everything else is delay. Everything else is avoidance. Everything else leads back to the same place you've been trying to escape. So this is the moment. Not later. Not tomorrow. Now. You take one action you've been avoiding. Immediately. No hesitation. And you complete it. Fully. Because that one action is not about the task. It is about the standard you are setting. From this point forward, you don't think more than you act. You act more than you think. And that changes everything. Not gradually. Decisively. Because once you cross that line, you don't go back. You can't. Because now you've seen the truth. Thinking does not move your life. Action does. And once that becomes your default, you become something most people never reach. Unstoppable. If you made it this far, then you already know what to do. So don't stop here. Subscribe to the Unbroken Protocol. And continue with the next video. You can exist without mental struggle. See you in our next video.